My husband Lucas orchestrated our family's bankruptcy and publicly auctioned my mother's keepsakes to humiliate me. Convinced I was penniless, he and his new lover watched me like a clown. With a cold smile, I kept outbidding them until I spent my last penny. Just as he thought I'd completely lost my mind, I calmly told him, "Now it's my turn. I'll pay 10.8 billion to buy your house and have it removed from Jiangqing's registry before sunset today." At the underground heritage auction in the northern suburbs, the air conditioning blasted like an ice cellar. Standing at the back of the crowd, I watched as my mother's manuscripts were projected page by page onto the central screen. The delicate, slender gold script, the very handwriting I'd imitated since childhood. In the upper right corner of each page, a number is marked. In the lower left corner, my mother scribbled her mood notes. Exhibit number 1. The auctioneer's voice was slick as silk. Luna's masterpiece, the rumored prototype of a game-changing gene-targeted drug, had a starting bid of 3 million. A buzz of murmurs rippled through the room, like a swarm of flies sensing blood. Lucas really went all out, digging up every last detail about Kara's family. This isn't just digging up dirt, it's stripping Kara's family of their last shred of dignity and roasting it over an open flame. I hear that if all 108 pages of that manuscript were assembled, it would be enough to launch a new pharmaceutical company from scratch all the way to going public. A gaze as sharp as a knife sliced through me. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. I stared fixedly at the man seated at the head of the table, my husband of 5 years, Lucas. The seat beside him should have been mine. Now, it was occupied by Alma. Lucas's fingertips idly brushed Alma's hair, those eyes that had gazed at me countless times now filled with nothing but tenderness. As if I were merely an unwelcome intruder. I pushed through the crowd, step by step, until I stood before them. The entire room fell silent. "Lucas." My voice trembled violently. "My family's bankruptcy, was it really your doing?" He finally lifted his eyes to meet mine, a cruel curve playing at the corners of his mouth. He said nothing. Silence was the sharpest blade. Tears welled up. "Why?" I heard my own hoarse voice. "Just because a year ago, at that auction, I made you lose face?" A year ago, when relocating Lucas's grandfather's grave, I spotted a prime feng shui plot that the Tsin family also coveted. Without consulting anyone, I offered triple the asking price, leaving the Tsins utterly humiliated before the entire community. Back then, Lucas kissed me in front of all our relatives, calling me his proudest, most willful little wildcat. Now, he's broken my claws with his own hands and thrown me into the mud. Lucas grabbed the microphone without even bothering to stand up. "Kara, time is money. If you're not interested in bidding, don't block my friends from making a fortune." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd below erupted in laughter. "Get rich. Lucas, open up. First page, I'll pay 4 million. 5 million. This is a golden goose." I stood frozen, like a statue. A greasy voice whispered in my ear, "What's wrong, Kara? Short on cash? Please, big brother. Let me bid for you. Tonight, you can teach me what's written in this manuscript." I whipped my head around, my gaze sharp as poison. The man froze for a moment, then burst out laughing. "Whoa, that's pretty spicy. Lucas left some leftovers, and we can keep playing with them." I felt ice run through my body and turned to flee. I feared that if I stayed any longer, I'd lose my mind right there. "Where to?" Lucas's icy voice came from behind me. The show had only just begun. Everyone in the venue was waiting for me to break down. I took a deep breath, flicked my hair back, and amid the stunned stares of the crowd, found a corner seat and sat down. My eyes were red. "Let's begin," I said to the auctioneer. The auctioneer gave me a meaningful look and brought down the hammer. On the giant screen, the details of that page of manuscript were magnified. It was the gift my mother gave me on my 18th birthday. She said it would be the foundation of our livelihood from then on. Now, it has become the instrument Lucas uses to humiliate me. 10 million. In the brief moment I lost my focus, the price had skyrocketed. The man bidding turned and winked at me. The molecular formula here is more beautiful than diamonds. If we crack this research, the next trillion-dollar pharmaceutical empire will be ours. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his arm casually draped over Alma's chair back, watching it all unfold like a circus performance that had nothing to do with him. I picked up the bid paddle in front of me. Amidst the roar of the crowd, I heard my own voice, clear and terrifying. 10 million. End of bidding. Cap off bidding. The unspoken rule at estate auctions, bid the highest estimated market price to forcibly end the round. The cost? That price often carries a premium several times over. All voices fell silent. 10 million. For a single page. The auctioneer's professional smile froze on his face. Lot 38, Kara, are you sure? Yes. I slumped, dropped the paddle, and sank back into my chair. Lucas's brow twitched almost imperceptibly. Damn crazy bitch, someone muttered in the crowd. What a shame, I was just starting to get the hang of it. What's there to fear? How many pages can she last? Back when she bought that plot of land, she drained every last penny from her dowry. Now her family's bankrupt, she's just an empty shell. Congratulations to Lot 38, Kara. The auctioneer's voice carried a hint of mockery. I closed my eyes. The manuscript's contents didn't matter. What mattered was that it was my mother's legacy. I couldn't let these hyenas divide her life's work among themselves like spoils of war. The screen immediately switched to the second page. Exhibit number 2. Starting bid, 3 million. The notes on this page were more personal. The medicine from the old man next door seemed to be working. That was my grandfather's neighbor, who'd been plagued by illness his entire life. 8 million. 10 million. 12 million. The betting was even hotter than before. A well-fed man even left his seat and walked over to me. The thick stench of cigar smoke on him made me sick. Kara, I never would have guessed your mom had that kind of skill. What, is this some family secret passed down through generations? You know about it too? I turned my head, my gaze icy. Get lost. He chuckled and reached out to touch my shoulder. Don't be so hot-headed. Back when Lucas was protecting you, no one dared mess with you. Things are different now. If you'd just be a little more cooperative, your big brother here would look out for you. Like this one here, I'll help you out. Before his hand could touch me, I grabbed the ice-cold water from the table and splashed it all over his face. He leapt up with a yelp, pointing his finger at my nose and cursing, "You bitch. You're asking for it. Don't touch me." My voice was as low as ice in a cellar. The room fell silent. Lucas's face darkened. The man, realizing his outburst, wiped his face, sat back down with a scowl, and raised his paddle. 20 million. Without hesitation, I raised mine again. The final bid. I could hear my own bones creaking. Uttering those 2 words felt like draining every ounce of strength from my body. This time, the auctioneer's face wore an unmasked sneer. 38, capped again. He didn't even bother going through the formalities, the deal was done. Kara, just a friendly reminder, based on the assets you registered when you entered, your current cash flow is already below 5 million. The entire room erupted in a chorus of schadenfreudisch gasps. Still acting tough even when broke? Let's see how she handles the next card. My body swayed, and I braced myself against the table to keep from falling. Go on, I said. The screen lit up, displaying page 3. Exhibit number 3. Starting bid, 3 million. This page held only one line of small print. Dreamed of him again. Wish I could forget. Bid closed. Before anyone could react, my voice rang out for the 3rd time. This time, the entire room erupted. Even Lucas sat up straight, his gaze fixed on me with piercing intensity. The auctioneer lowered his gavel, arms crossed over his chest. Kara, are you kidding? We have your capital verification report on file. The sum of all your liquid assets doesn't even cover half the reserve price. The crowd immediately started jeering. Beg me, the fat guy I'd splashed water on earlier licked his lips and shouted. Call me Big Brother, and I'll buy this ticket for you. I ignored him, my eyes fixed on Lucas. He was looking right back at me. That look held not a shred of marital affection, only the mocking disdain of a cat toying with its prey. Look, this is the woman you once loved deeply, now clowning around on stage for some pathetic shred of dignity. Seeing him silent, the crowd grew bolder. Just then, Alma, who had remained silent, suddenly raised her hand softly. All right, her voice was quiet yet carried clearly across the room, I'll buy this manuscript for my sister. Lucas looked at her, the icy glare in his eyes melting instantly, replaced by an indulgent smile. Alma didn't look at him, but gazed at me with pity. After all, Lucas often said he couldn't bear to see the Chi family's current state. This manuscript is of little use to me. Buying it and burning it in front of everyone for my future mother-in-law would at least ease my sister's heartache, fulfilling her filial duty for her. Filial piety. Those two words pierced my heart like poisoned needles. Instantly, a chorus of admiration filled the room. Look. This is the bearing of a true matriarch. No wonder Lucas chose Alma, cultured, kind-hearted. Unlike some who only know how to throw tantrums. Her piercing gaze stabbed into me like a sharp blade. A fleeting smirk of satisfaction flashed across Alma's lips before vanishing, replaced by a look of concern. Sis, stop pretending. Get your filthy hands off me. My cold voice cut through her act. She froze. What did you say? I said I don't need some mistress using money stolen from my husband to show filial piety to my mother. Leaning back in my chair, my raging fury ironically calmed me down. As long as I'm still standing, I don't need your fake compassion, you two scumbags. Kara. Lucas finally spoke, his voice cold enough to freeze the air. It was the first time he'd called my name since the auction began, yet it was to defend another woman. I twisted my lips into a wry smile, averting my gaze from him and turning instead to the auctioneer. I said I'd make the final bid. But what about your money? The host looked troubled, glancing at Lucas as if awaiting instructions. Not enough? Then use property as collateral. I pulled a set of keys from my bag and tossed them onto the table. South City, the only old house my mother left me. Market value should be worth 10 million. That's my last resort, my final refuge. Everyone gasped in shock. This woman's truly lost her mind. She'd give up her home just to save face? TSK, TSK, TSK. A cornered beast fights back. Just wait until the next round, she'll be begging us on her knees. A flicker of something strange passed through Lucas's eyes before being swallowed by icy indifference. He acquiesced. The auctioneer completed the formalities, and the set of keys was taken away. The transaction was finalized. My world, in that instant, was utterly emptied. I sat slumped in my chair like a soulless puppet, listening to the snickers around me. A lump of blood clogged my throat, sweet and bloody. The screen refreshed. Exhibit number 4. Starting bid, 3 million. I like this. This page has the dosage for the ready-made medicine, crucial. I'll pay 20 million. That fat guy from earlier jumped out again, looking at me with an air of superiority. 25 million. 30 million. The bids kept climbing. And I was already an outsider. Cap. A light, almost muttered voice escaped my lips. The room fell silent for a second, then erupted in laughter louder than any before. Even the auctioneer was struggling to keep a straight face. Kara, please refrain from disrupting the proceedings. Otherwise, we will have no choice but to ask you to leave. I stared at him coldly. I am not disrupting anything. I am placing the final bid. And not just for this one page, I want all 105 pages of the manuscript. Pfft. Alma was the first to crack, bursting into laughter as she went limp against Lucas's shoulder. The tenderness in Lucas's eyes was almost palpable as he patted her back, soothing her like a frightened kitten. The whole place went completely wild. Has she lost her mind? Taking everything left? That's over $1 billion. She couldn't even scrape that together before she went bankrupt. Still pretending. Still putting on a show. Playing the part even as she faces ruin. A man who was friends with Lucas stood up impatiently and pointed at me. Kara. We've given you face and played 3 rounds with you. Now your pockets are emptier than your wallet. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. The auctioneer had completely lost his patience. Kara, we're only letting you sit here out of respect for Lucas. Keep this up, and security will escort you out. I narrowed my eyes, as if oblivious to the surrounding commotion. Who said I don't have money? The moment those words left his mouth, Lucas's gaze suddenly sharpened, fixing on me with an intensity that felt like nails. The room's mocking laughter died down, and everyone exchanged bewildered glances. Are you kidding me? This is an estate auction. Is our verification system just for show? We've dug into your assets so thoroughly, we've left you with nothing. I ignored them, focusing solely on the auctioneer, taking in every word. I know the rules. As long as there's money in my account, I'm eligible to keep bidding, right? It's possible, but a new capital verification. I cut him off. Silence. Everyone seemed to have been choked. Lucas frowned imperceptibly. I picked up the microphone beside me. My voice, amplified through the speakers, filled the entire hall with a heart-stopping calm. What's the matter? Scared of your own trap now? Humph. Bring it on. That fat guy yelled, let everyone see you die in the clear light of day. On the giant screen, my mother's manuscript was removed. In its place appeared the asset verification interface. My name and bank account number ending in 7777 were prominently displayed. Unit 38, Kara, proceed with secondary asset verification. Everyone held their breath, staring intently at the screen. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. How could she remain so calm? Could she really have something up her sleeve? Impossible. Lucas had severed every connection to the Chi family. Who in this circle would dare secretly aid her now? That's pure madness, trying to grab one last bit of attention before getting thrown out. The capital verification progress bar reached its end. Ding. A faint chime sounded. After deducting the $30 million from the 3 capped subscriptions and the money from my mortgaged house, account balance, 0. Ha 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 ha. The laughter that had been bottled up for so long burst forth like a flood, instantly engulfing me. I told you she was completely nuts. Thought she had some trump card up her sleeve, but it turned out to be a dud. Alma laughed until tears streamed down her face. A flicker of expected disdain touched Lucas's lips. The auctioneer made a gesture, the last shred of feigned patience vanishing from his face. I'm sorry, Kara, but you've severely disrupted the proceedings. Security. Several burly men in black suits, towering like iron pillars, immediately stepped forward and surrounded me. Wait. Amidst everyone's gaze, which treated me like a madman, I sat quietly, not a trace of panic in me. I even lifted my wrist and glanced down at my watch. The minute hand had just passed the 12 o'clock position. The index finger, resting on the armrest, tapped lightly in time with the second hand. Tap. Tap tap. After 3 taps, I looked up and gestured to the security guards who had approached me to step aside, my gaze shifting past them to the auctioneer. Now, I whispered softly, it's time for another inspection. The fat man had completely lost his patience. Is this ever going to end? We're here to do business, not watch you put on a monkey show. The auctioneer waved his hand impatiently, drag him out and throw him onto the street. But before he could finish speaking, his eyes widened as if he'd seen a ghost. Then, as if someone had grabbed him by the throat, he whipped his head around and stared fixedly, utterly incredulous, at the massive electronic screen behind him. In that instant, all color drained from his face. This can't be. how could this? He stammered, his voice shaking uncontrollably. Almost simultaneously, Lucas, seated at the head of the table, sprang to his feet. The entire auditorium, every single person who had been mocking moments ago, rose to their feet. Dead silence fell. Amidst the stillness, suppressed gasps rose in waves, uncontrollably. That must be fake, right? The computer system malfunctioned? On the giant screen at the venue, my account balance interface remained open. But behind that glaring zero, without warning, new digits began to flicker and jump wildly. Not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands increasing, but a long string of dizzying zeros. The final bid was sealed. It resembled a string of phone numbers. 108 billion. Not a penny more, not a penny less. The air in the hall seemed to solidify into a tangible substance. Even breathing became difficult. I slowly rose to my feet, brushing aside the security guard who remained frozen in place. I smoothed out the slightly wrinkled hem of my skirt, my gaze calmly sweeping over the stiff, shock-twisted faces before finally settling on Lucas, his face ashen. His expression was as if he'd been publicly slapped 100 times. Humiliation, shock, and a hint of something I'd never seen before, panic. Alma, meanwhile, was completely dumbfounded, her mouth agape, her face as pale as paper. I remember now. A trembling, aged voice broke the silence. It was an old-timer in offshore trusts. Back then, Luna approached me. She wanted to set up an offshore key fund to funnel all the proceeds from her private research patents into it. The beneficiary is solely her daughter. There are 2 activation conditions. First, the beneficiary must be at least 28 years old. Second, the activation location must be on the domestic public asset verification system. The elder looked at me with a complex expression. Today is your birthday? I nodded and offered him a faint smile. It was the first genuine smile I'd given today. Today, at midnight, I turned 28. My mother had known this day would come. In her own way, at my darkest hour, she gave me the strongest armor from the other side. A commotion erupted at the entrance to the venue as a middle-aged man in a bespoke suit and gold-rimmed glasses strode in, surrounded by a group of bodyguards. He walked straight up to me and gave a slight bow. Kara, happy birthday. I'm Danny from Credit Suisse, the executor of your mother's estate. My apologies for the delay. He handed me a document and a jet-black Parker fountain pen. I took it, didn't even glance at it, and signed my name at the bottom. After signing, I handed the pen back to him. Turning around, I picked up the microphone again. In that moment, I was the master of this venue. The auction continues. My voice echoes clearly through the microphone, reaching every corner, cold and unquestionable. The auctioneer, like a puppet, instinctively picks up the gavel, his throat parched. Shall we proceed? Right. As I watched Lucas's face turn from pale to ashen, the smile at the corner of my mouth grew deeper and colder. But the rules need to be changed. I paused, savoring the fear spreading in his eyes. Lucas, I said, now it's your turn to bid. I'll offer 10.8 billion to buy your family out of Jiangqing, before sunset today. You dare? He finally found his voice, but it was dry and terrifying. Watch me. I set down the receiver, turned to Danny, and ordered, start buying up all the S-Group shares on the market. Target every single one of their partners. I want results before sunset. Yes, Kara. I didn't spare Lucas another glance, as if he were nothing but a pile of trash waiting to be cleared away. I walked over to the velvet box containing my mother's manuscripts, reached out, and gently stroked it. My voice was soft, yet loud enough for those closest to me to hear. Mom, did you see? Those who bullied us, me and you, I want them to pay with their lives. The air seemed to have been sucked out. The last trace of color drained from Lucas's face, and that air of commanding control was utterly torn apart, leaving only raw, naked malice. 108 billion? Kara, what did you use to buy it? He roared like a trapped beast. You think spinning a story will scare me? Danny pulled out his tablet expressionlessly, opened an interface, and projected it onto the giant screen. This is Credit Suisse's highest authority real-time asset verification. Kara, the sole heir designated by Luna Kara's mother, the legal entity. That string of zeros below is enough to make one physically uncomfortable. Lucas, my client Kara is now indeed qualified to acquire 38% of your company's currently outstanding shares. Moreover, we have initiated a secondary market takeover procedure. Danny's voice was steady, yet it carried the weight of a judge delivering a verdict. He predicted that within an hour, S Group's stock price would begin a precipitous decline. Lucas's body visibly trembled. Alma, holding his arm, her fingertips quivering, Lucas, this is fake, right? She couldn't possibly. I didn't give them a moment to react before striding up to the fat guy I'd splashed water on earlier. He flinched in fright, his chair sliding back half a meter. What's your name? I demanded. Tom. He stammered out the answer. Just now, you were looking at page 4? I picked up the manuscript from the velvet box, flipped to page 4, and held it between my fingertips as if pinching an insignificant leaf. He nodded frantically, cold sweat trickling down his flabby flesh. I laughed. Now, it's still yours. I said, 30 million, the price you offered, you won't have to pay a single penny. But there's one condition. My smile fades, my voice turns cold. Now, stand in front of Lucas and give him back every single word he just hurled at me. He insults you once, you insult him right back. The room fell deathly silent. Every pair of eyes darted back and forth between Lucas and me. This was humiliation, a humiliation far worse than a slap across the face. Tom's face went pale as he looked at Lucas desperately, as if begging for help. Lucas's eyes were so red they looked like they might bleed. Kara, don't push me. Am I pushing you? I draw out my words slowly. I'm just playing by your rules, joining you in a more thrilling game. My gaze swept across the room, taking in all those who had once mocked me. Today, whoever stands with me is Lucas's enemy. Whoever stands with him, I paused, enunciating each word, is at odds with me and my 108 billion. Amid the crowd, it was like a bomb had gone off. Those faces that had been fawning over Lucas just minutes ago now showed hesitation and struggle. Finally, silently, they shifted a few steps toward me. Power has always followed money. Tom's chubby cheeks twitched. Finally, gritting his teeth, he made his choice. He stood up, walked over to Lucas, took a deep breath, and stammered out, Lucas, I'm sorry. He raised his hand. Smack. The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the entire hall. Lucas's head jerked to the side, 5 distinct finger marks appearing on his face. He was completely stunned. I leaned against the display stand, running my fingernail lightly along the edge of the manuscript. Let's begin, I murmured. Reclaim the debt, line by line. The financial world of Jiangqing was turned upside down overnight. At the next day's market opening, the 4 characters S Group plummeted like a waterfall, crashing vertically from the top of the screens. Panic selling ensued, partners collectively terminated contracts, and banks withdrew loans. Danny's team, like a pack of precise vultures, tore into the once mighty S Group, each bite striking an artery. Lucas wasn't going to sit back and wait for the end. I moved out of the old house in the southern part of the city and into a penthouse apartment in the financial district. The massive floor-to-ceiling windows faced the precariously leaning S Group tower. In the afternoon, the apartment doorbell rang. On the screen appeared Lucas's mother, my former mother-in-law. I answered the call. Kara. You unlucky star. What the hell do you think you're doing? She screamed hysterically on the other end. What did my family ever do to you? You actually teamed up with outsiders to ruin Lucas. I looked at her face, twisted with rage, and felt calm. Where were you when he auctioned off my mother's belongings? Wasn't that Elma's idea? Lucas was just trying to scare you. Don't be scared now, I chuckled softly. I was just trying to scare you guys. I hung up and blocked the number. Half an hour later, an unknown number sent a video clip. I clicked it open. It showed my mother's gravestone, splattered with the words bitch in red paint. The camera shakes as it pans across the scene, finally settling on a bouquet of black roses at the headstone, Lucas's favorite flowers. Threat. Provocation. My blood ran cold in an instant. I immediately called Danny. Find those paint throwers. I'm already looking into it, Kara. No. I cut him off, my voice icy. Find them. Then break their hands. Silence hung on the line for a few seconds. Understood. After hanging up, I stared at the S Group logo on the building outside my window. The last shred of hesitation in my eyes was burned to ashes by rage. Lucas, you think this is the bottom line? No. For someone like you, there is no bottom line. Late at night, Danny's call came through. Kara, we found the person. It was Lucas's private bodyguard who did it. His voice sounded weary, but as we were investigating Lucas's financial chain, we discovered something very strange. He said that 3 years ago, he transferred a substantial sum of secret funds overseas. The account holder shares the same name as your mother's close friend. Moreover, this money appears to have been designated for long-term medical expenses. I froze. Mother, did she have any close female friends while she was alive? In my memory, she was always solitary and quiet, with almost no social life beyond her research. Keep looking. I said, I need to know who this money was spent on, and at which hospital. If Lucas's revenge involves secrets about my mother that I'm unaware of, then this game is far more complicated than I ever imagined. The battle rages on in the financial markets. I shut myself in my apartment, just as my mother once did, carefully turning each page of the 108-page manuscript she left behind. Beyond the dense medical terminology, it contained mostly fragments of her casual musings. Most of it has to do with me. Kara has grown taller again. Kara refused to eat her vegetables today. Kara called Mama for the first time. My tears fell drop by drop onto the paper. I never knew that my mother, always locked away in her lab, so quiet and reserved, harbored such tender love deep within her heart. When I turned to page 34, my fingertips froze. There it was, dreamed of him again. I wish I could forget. Beneath this sentence, several faint words were barely legible, as if they'd been crossed out. You had to hold it up to the light to make them out. David. Don't blame me. David. Who was that? I flipped back through the pages. In the latter part of the manuscript, these delirious sentences grew more frequent. He doesn't believe me. If he knew, he'd go mad. David, I've kept all your paintings. Paintings? My heart leapt. I rushed into the bedroom and opened the sandalwood box we'd brought from the old house, the one Mother had kept locked until her death. Danny called a locksmith for me. When the box was opened, there was nothing valuable inside. Only a thick stack of drawings wrapped in oil paper. I unfolded them one by one. They were all sketches. They depicted the same young man. Arched brows and starry eyes, an air of effortless grace. Even in black and white lines, that commanding spirit remains undeniable. And on the back of the final painting, a line of small script, to my one true confidant. David. David. I collapsed to the floor as if struck by lightning. David. Lucas's uncle, the true genius heir to the S Group 20 years ago. At the age of 25, he died young in an unexpected car accident. Lucas's father, my former father-in-law, was then able to take over the family business. So the man Mother couldn't forget wasn't my father. But Lucas's uncle? What exactly happened between them? A bone-chilling cold crept up my spine, all the way to the crown of my head. The next day, Danny's investigation results came in. The mysterious medical expense had been paid to a private sanatorium in Zurich, Switzerland. The patient admitted to the hospital was Betty, her mother's college classmate and once her closest friend. 20 years ago, Betty had been sent abroad for treatment due to severe psychological trauma and had been receiving care ever since. Lucas was paying for Betty's treatment. Why? I booked a flight to Zurich immediately. Just moments before boarding, I received a message from Lucas, just a single photo. It showed Alma in her wedding dress, beaming with happiness. In the background stood the old family home of Lucas's family. He was telling me in his own way that even as the company teetered on the brink, he was determined to give Alma a proper place. When I return, I'll present you with a grand gift. After sending my reply, I turned off my phone. The Swiss sanatorium was as picturesque as a fairy tale. Betty looked more normal than I'd imagined, though she was very thin, with a look of deep-seated fear in her eyes. When she saw the photo of my mother I pulled out, she seemed confused at first, then suddenly remembered something, and her emotions instantly spiraled out of control. "It's Luna." She grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my flesh. "Run. He'll kill you. Run." "Who is he?" I gritted my teeth against the pain, staring intently at her. She was shaking violently, repeating over and over, "Blood. So much blood. David. I'm sorry." My heart sank. After talking with her for a long time, I pieced together a terrifying truth from her chaotic, fragmented words. 20 years ago, my mother and David were secret lovers. And Betty was the only one who knew. That day, Betty witnessed David's accident firsthand. It wasn't an accident at all. It was murder. The one who did it was Lucas's father, Jerry. Meanwhile, to protect Betty, the sole witness, from being silenced, the mother struck a deal with Jerry using a fabricated research paper. She chose to conceal the truth, ensuring Betty's survival at the cost of marrying my father, a researcher of ordinary background who knew nothing of her past, thereby severing all ties with Lucas's family. Why did Lucas pay Betty's medical bills? That was the final mystery. Betty shook her head fearfully. "I don't know. I don't know anything." I knew she was lying. Upon returning from Switzerland, the situation in Jiangqing had shifted. Lucas had somehow stabilized the stock price, though Lucas himself didn't know how. Even several families that had previously sided with me were now wavering. When I got back to the apartment, Danny was waiting for me. His expression turned grave. "Kara, we've discovered that the fund stabilizing S group come from an overseas family fund with impeccable credibility. Lucas seems to have found a new patron." He didn't find a patron. I told him what I'd learned in Zurich, and he traded my mother's secret for a lifeline. The fact that he was willing to pay Betty's medical bills proves he's known the truth about that murder 20 years ago all along. In fact, the true purpose of that auction that humiliated me wasn't about Alma at all. It was to force me to hand over everything my mother left behind, to find the evidence of that murder from years ago. The ramblings in the manuscript weren't mere nostalgia. They were a code. I spread the 108 pages across the floor once more. This time, I wasn't searching for words, but for patterns. Arrangements, sequences, even every punctuation mark. I stayed up all night. When the first rays of sunlight streamed into the apartment, I found it. On the headers of certain pages, there were some extremely tiny pinholes. If you didn't look closely, you wouldn't notice them at all. I pulled out the pages with these pinholes and stacked them together in order. I held the stack of paper up to the sunlight. Light streamed through the pinholes, casting a row of crooked letters and numbers onto the floor. It was a Swiss bank safe deposit box number. Lucas and Alma's wedding was set for a week later. The venue was that very piece of prime feng shui land I had secured for his family. They had built a grand white chapel there. Invitations were sent to all the city's elite. Everyone assumed that the war between Kara and Lucas would ultimately end in an ugly stalemate. My counterattack came to an abrupt halt, as if I'd run out of ammunition. On the wedding day, I wore a black gown and drove alone to the venue, bringing no one with me. When I appeared at the entrance of the auditorium, all the music stopped. Lucas stood there in a crisp white suit, his face dark and sullen as he stared at me. Alma had her arm hooked through his, her eyes brimming with undisguised smugness and provocation. Kara, what are you doing here? Come to watch me lose? Lucas's voice was hushed. No. I held up a manila envelope. I'm here to deliver a wedding gift. I pushed through the crowd and walked straight onto the stage. From the document folder, I pulled out a stack of items. Among them were photographs, pictures of my mother and David taken over 20 years ago. There was a document, a copy of an old autopsy report, clearly indicating that David's break lines showed signs of being cut by a sharp instrument. Also, a voice recorder. I pressed play. Betty's trembling voice echoed throughout the auditorium. It was Jerry. He cut the break line himself. I saw it. I saw everything. Luna agreed to all his demands just to save me. The entire room fell silent. Jerry, Lucas's father, slumped in the front row, his face ashen. The faint composure on Lucas's face finally shattered completely. These are all forgeries. He lunged forward like a madman, trying to snatch the thing from my hands. I dodged it with ease. Is that so? I looked at him, my eyes holding no hatred, only a desolate pity. Well then, how about this? I pulled out a second document and tossed it at his feet. It was a DNA comparison report. Among the exorbitant medical bills you paid for Betty was one for regular amniocentesis tests. I watched his face turn ashen in an instant as I uttered, word by word, the secret that could condemn him to hell. Lucas, you used your father's murder secret to blackmail Betty into keeping an even bigger secret for you. That is, she was pregnant with David's child back then. You are not Jerry's son at all. You are David's posthumous child. It was Jerry, he killed his own brother, then raised his son as his heir for 30 long years. Boom. It felt like a bolt of lightning had struck everyone's mind. Lucas, like a sculpture stripped of all its bones, knelt stiffly to the ground. In that instant, I crushed his world to dust with my own hands. His revenge, the family honor he guarded, all his pride and self-respect, everything became a colossal joke. He hated the wrong person and loved the wrong person. Alma let out a scream, released her grip, and retreated several steps as if avoiding a plague. I didn't glance back at them once. I descended the stage, walked through the crowd of stunned guests, and exited the auditorium. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. I lifted my head and gazed at the sky. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing nearer. Danny had already called the police. Lucas's world had collapsed. From money to blood ties to dignity. I had completed the most thorough revenge. But I wasn't as happy as I'd imagined. I just suddenly missed my mother terribly. I opened the car door, picked up the velvet box from the passenger seat, and gently lifted the lid. Inside, 108 pages of manuscript lay quietly. The surface is soaked with my tears, holding her lifelong secrets and sorrows. I start the car and drive away from this troubled place. Mom. It's over. We go home.